You'll go with anything. So, hi everybody. How are you? We're gonna wait till some people come in, but I'm Kate Lee from Lately. My guest today is Brian Wallace. We're gonna talk about who Brian is and how amazing he is shortly. But before we do, you guys know the drill. So chime in on the chat. Let us know where you're from. Let us know if you like Brian's tree sculpture hanging in the back of his thing, which is pretty cool. I'm doing Pac-Man over here. I can't mirror myself today. And my garage sale find the fame sign, which is where's that back there? Because I think I need some fame. I mean, they had.
I was wondering what it said.
They have, well, there's two of them. So there's fame and money, and there was also power. And I just chose fame and money because I was like, I feel like I'm good on power.
Okay.
So everybody, let us know where you are in the chats, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitter or various places. Hello. My team is, of course, there saying hi as well. Also, I love to know the weather. So, Brian, what's the weather where you are? What do you got?
Greetings from sunny Cincinnati, Ohio.
All right. The heartbeat of America. Excellent. Cincinnati. That's so great. I lived in Pittsburgh for a while, actually, which obviously is not Ohio, but, you guys are kind of sister cities a little bit. Enough. Yeah, close enough. They don't say yins in Ohio, do they? I don't know. Do they?
I don't think so. I think that's just a Pennsylvania thing.
That's a Pennsylvania thing, yeah. Who knows?
I'm originally from New York, though. So
you're from New York originally?
Yeah, I was born in Brooklyn, but I grew up in the suburbs of New York City. And it's so strange because a lot of people's accents in this part of the country is almost the exact same thing. So I walk around and I'm like, why does it sound like where I'm from? A little non-regional, mid-Atlantic-ish stuff. I don't know. Pretty weird.
Weird. Yeah. Well, I'm reading the Beastie Boys book, by the way, for anybody who is a Beastie Boys fan. They are all obviously from Brooklyn too. Mm-hmm. And it's been so interesting to me because I'm getting this slice of life that I grew up in, right? I'm 47, so that's my age, but I don't know the nuances of all the things they're talking about. Meaning like they're talking about, there was like a public TV children's show aired in New York City that obviously I didn't watch in Vermont because we didn't have the same thing. And so It's so interesting is because it's the thing that's super familiar to me, but as though also it's another world, right?
Yeah. Like when you watch TV in New York, whenever it's like, all right, and now we're going to cut to the weather and they just come to whatever, they just keep it with the New York house. And it's another world of broadcasting. It's pretty strange. It's crazy. We're in the same age bracket, by the way.
Oh,
I'm
cool.
Younger, and I'm about to have a birthday.
Hey, happy early. When is it?
Huh?
When is it?
What birthday is it? 44.
Yeah. 40. No, I mean when May
9th.
May 9th. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Awesome.
Very Taurus. I'm stubborn, and that's probably a good thing in marketing. The internet's garbage, right? So it's fine.
Yeah, I'm a Capricorn. We're supposed to like never be friends, right? Because we're both like. No, I'm just kidding.
We'll be friends. We moderate being a Taurus with the Midwestern atmosphere. You can be friends with everyone.
There you go, right? Yeah.
I always have New York in my head and in my back pocket. So
cool. Well, I'm just kidding, of course. So hey everybody, thanks for joining. As ever, today we ask for questions anytime, but you guys might have some really great questions for Brian. Just put them in the chat and we'll make sure somebody lets me know and gets them. Thanks, Kristen. She's wishing you happy birthday, which is so super nice.
Oh, thank you.
Here in the Hudson Valley of New York, Andy's a Virgo. That's great. We've got a beautiful dogwood just blossoming outside my window, which I love. So let's get to it all. If you haven't dropped where you are or what your weather is, there's still time to do that. And like I said, it's the most interesting subject, even though people poo-poo it as the most boring. It's not at all, right? Because it's the great common denominator, right, Brian?
Well, that and GIFs. So I'm watching everybody's comments. I'm looking at the YouTube live comments. When you all at Lately were talking about the event yesterday, I immediately went to my go-to, which is GIFs on Twitter. And Chris Bro and I were spending hours basically just doing GIFs from The Office. If your GIF game is not strong, you don't belong on social media.
This is so good. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, there's a hole in my life now that they moved The Office off of Netflix. And
oh my God, right? Like, if you think about the percentage of internet traffic that was related to people watching The Office all day and night, it's kind of horrifying. So I don't know what they were doing, but get on Peacock, way to ruin everybody's life and let you watch it. Was it like 2-3 seasons? What
Who do they think they are, right? All right, so let's be formal for 1 second so I can actually give you the microphone. So hi, everybody. Welcome to Lately Live. I'm Kate Lee, the CEO of Lately. This is Brian Wallace. Brian is the founder of New Sourcing, which is a top-rated and award-winning infographic agency. So we're going to talk about infographics and all kinds of things today. His clients range from Twitter, Microsoft, PepsiCo, Time. I mean, it's a huge, amazing list that we're all salivating over. He also runs LinkedIn local events. He hosts the Next Action podcast, which has been paused temporarily, but may be spinning up. He serves on the South by Southwest advisory board, and you're a Google board member too. Is that right, Brian?
Yep.
Yeah.
So 13 people on the Google Small Business Advisory Council.
Here we go. So in case you didn't know, this man is amazing, and we're so glad to have him with us. So thank you, Brian.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. So let's talk about first. We spend a lot of time on copywriting here and social media, specifically how to write, not only to get your message across, but to do it with pizzazz and, panache and all the things. You have to, make some noise. And I find that the challenge for most is that part. Like, they understand maybe what message they want to generally get across, but turning on the voice part. So how do you use, how can they do that better with infographics, perhaps? Is there a way to maybe, get over the writer's block of persona inclusion with images?
Oh, yeah. So everybody is always so surprised when it's like, oh, I'm a visual learner. I'm a visual thinker. It's like, no kidding. So is everybody. There's entire regions of your brain for this. So abstract this a little bit, right? So back to our tree over here. So if I printed out 2 essays on a regular sheet of paper, one over here, one over here. You like my thought experiment?
I do. Yeah, we're all going with it.
You're all going with this. So I made it in just, let's say, regular 12-point font. Could you even see what it said from there? I mean, I could see your sign and I could see fame, and we should talk about fame later, because I think there's a certain level of influence and fame, but we'll get back to that later.
Okay.
But back to the text, back to the words. If I was at regular 12-point font over here and over here, your eyes glaze over. Maybe you really squint. Maybe you have exceptional vision that's beyond what everybody ever gets, including corrected with glasses. It's just, you see where I'm going with this, right?
Sure,
it's going to get lost and it's going to fade into the background. Now pretend that we can focus in and we're at the doctor's office, better like this or like this, all that weird crap. Why do they even say that? So you're looking at it on the internet, and now you can see full 20/20, but you're still suffering from blindness because people get bored to tears because it's visually uninteresting. Jacob Nielsen, who famously said, probably at this point, 20 to 30 years ago, father of usability, said that people don't read on the internet. People do something called chunking. For those of you who aren't familiar with that web experience, user experience term, it basically means that you're not reading it like a book. If you were just reading it for leisure or crack open a book like they used to do back in the day, I sure still do, because enough of my brain stares at the screen all day.
Same.
It's just a level of blindness. Your brain is searching for visual separators and infographics, but really beyond that, just visuals and rich media are going to change the game when it comes to getting somebody's attention for permission for more attention. So you see a lot of smart marketers out there, right? All these people are like, oh, people have the attention span of a goldfish, which is who even thought to say something like that? It's such a weird thing. Who's sitting there with a stopwatch watching the goldfish gets bored? But I digress. How is it that people, the same person with the same brain, is going to go watch The Queen's Gambit, Cobra Kai,
right,
Office, any of these things for hours on end? It's that one did a better job entertaining you and educating you or edutaining you. And in a world where everybody's just trying to make some noise, people making signal to stand out from the noise and doing it in a bit of a visual trick to get your attention and keep your attention for permission for more attention win the day. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I love hearing it explained this way. So one thing we talk about a lot is how, you eat with your eyes, right? And so I always say you read with your eyes the same way. It's that there's a visual experience here for sure. And it's tough. There's limitations, obviously, on the keyboard. in social, especially because you don't have bold and italics, for example, but you do have like all these other fabulous things, parentheses and ellipses and all caps and things like that. But still, there's limitations from beyond that, right? We have emojis, which, I love hate emojis because I need them because I have like resting bitch face in writing, they say. But they also feel like a super lazy crutch, right? So
again, though, they're visual separators. So if we don't know each other and then you send me 5 paragraphs of text, I'm just blind and probably bored out of my mind before I read it. And my subconscious brain is just like, what are we going to lose, collective brain, looking through all of this compared to the reward? I don't know if an emoji, to your point, is going to make that go away, but it's going to stop you. At least it's going to be a forced separation. And you can even do that with even without emojis, just spacing, fonts, right? You don't need to do full out visuals, but you should. Yeah.
So around the engagement, from infographics versus just plain text, can you talk about like, what's the business case? I'm sure people ask you this all the time, but for us newbies, like, why should we be doing this?
So I like to think of an infographic as reading time on a story. So when you have somebody's attention and it's keeping their attention, they sit there and they go through every little bit. So if you were probably following a heat map or their eye tracking, they would probably look at the header, see if it was interesting enough, look through a couple of points, go to the end, then scroll up and then slowly go down through it. So as a full read, I mean, imagine somebody being a captive audience to like a 3 to 5 minute read and then doing whatever desired action. It's kind of ridiculous. Like I've seen it where you can make things where you're basically rewiring human behavior on the fly, where they're going from passively clicking around their favorite social site, favorite blog, favorite news site, and then they're stopping dead in their tracks and they're like, wow, I'm going to go share that, print it, go with buyer intent, whatever the product or service is. Pretty tough to beat.
Right. And I like how you just described that too. And I want people to notice this because we've studied this at Lately quite a bit. My graphic designer is my chief product officer. And so he's especially keen to hear this today. But, when we're talking about even designing our website or our pitch decks, people, they start at the top and they read a little bit and then they immediately scroll down to the bottom. That's what happens. And then they come back up. So think about that. Like, because I do that when I'm even scrolling through social or Awesomanders is just reading the whole thing at once. I don't know if this is qualifying at chunking, but I'm trying to take it in first before I'm bothering to spend more time with it. Right? Is that right? So and it reminds me of resume writing, by the way, because I worked in that arena for a while. Like a resume is a visual. Yeah, it is. Okay.
Resumes aren't always so super visual, but the point remains. Like I just tell people, like, don't even bother with resumes anymore. I'm just like, people are watching what you're doing on LinkedIn. So I don't know why people are still sitting there with the Pony Express or whatever. Sorry, resume writers.
It's like that everywhere, I feel like we were just talking to somebody about the antiquatedness of the people in the foremost tech industries. The irony there is constant. Even me, actually. Like I have an iPhone 5 still.
Wow.
for example.
All right.
What is that? And I guess we can relate to this, to the power of communications in general. Is like, what is our reticence to either move forward or the need to hang on to something that of old, like the Beastie Boys, right?
Right.
Like, so what do you think? Like, when you're creating infographics for your customers, are you thinking about that? Are you trying to touch on memory, nostalgia?
It's a tough question. It really depends on what we're trying to do, who we're trying to impact, what kind of market it is. I think that there's a lot of mistakes in how people approach all of that stuff. So kind of like what I said with signal and noise, a lot of people just think that you have to be the noisiest out there, but it's annoying, right? I think a lot of people would do better just trying to figure it out right. I also think that people suffer from safety, basic crap ideas syndrome. I don't know
Yeah.
what the acronym is.
What's the acronym for that? Somebody write it down.
I don't know. Quick, put it in DSM-5. So it's kind of like this. You have a bunch of data-driven people who need to see analytics on everything, and they don't really go with the heuristic side of the brain. And gosh, you ever see there's like these endless multi-dozen, 100-page reports and white papers and ebooks and all this kind of stuff. And they're kind of dry and they're kind of boring. And it's all this water still wet garbage that we already knew, right? Yeah. So it's, I'm glad you spent all this money and you did all the fancy research, but we already knew that. Nobody cares. And like, why is this even a story? So they go with this data-driven approach. And don't get me wrong, I love data. I mean, infographic, what do you think the info part is? It's the information, right? But they come up with this self-fulfilling prophecy where it's this data first and they try to drive a story out of it. And this is where everybody just totally sucks at trying to do this, because what they actually need to do is they have to find the most interesting story, because there's literally data for everything, right? Because you can do your own poll. You can add narrative for where there isn't data. You can extrapolate different other things that exist. There's a lot of data. It's called the internet, right? And plenty of stuff that you can do yourself. So yeah, coming up with the story first, I think, is where everybody's getting that wrong. And before you build out the story, coming up with the best idea to then build out the story. Think of it like this. An infographic is not like a blog post or a listicle that you're just reading it from A to Z in a linear fashion. It's more like you are looking down a funnel and you're looking down that graduation, where you're coming with a big idea at the top and then you're bringing it to a specific argument or a specific point or a call to action at the bottom.
Yeah, I've noticed that in, like, we were working with, this is probably a different kind of form of infographics, and I forgot what the title of her title was, but I was at a conference and her job was to like draw a picture of the conversation.
Yeah, like while the person's speaking.
Yeah.
So different people call that different things. The main thing that I feel like a lot of the design community calls that, for everybody's knowledge, is sketchnoting.
Sketchnoting.
Yep.
Well, it was amazing because it's, you know, it's a little bit haphazard because you're not planning where the images go, but that's sort of the point of it, right? And then after the fact, you can see where she would spend time on. Sometimes it was where the time was actually spent during the conversation, or it was the idea more often that stood out most to her. So that would get, you know, different colors of marker more than the others, or highlighted. And so it was a really interesting, you know, version of I'm going to say an infographic type of idea. And it's not linear. Like, I find that most infographics, I feel, you know, they may be designed sometimes, you know, top to bottom, but they seem to be choose your own adventure. Like, you can really get into the story any way you want. Right. Yeah. Is that successful infographic, like a quality of that?
Yeah, I think that there should be enough throughout the piece to keep your engagement up, right? It shouldn't just be the header and then it just runs out of gas. I feel like when we're evaluating designers, by the way, little secret, most designers hate making infographics, because a lot of designers, they're good at like one or two things in design, but they don't want to be data scientists. They don't want to go figure out a bunch of charts and do all this high level research and typography and all sorts of different kinds of design. It's a little too much for one person. That's why we're a whole team end to end, where we have a whole research team, we have a design team, and then also like a media and promotion side. So yeah,
that makes sense. And so the other thing you keyed on, and I just want to make sure, is so I feel like the word story gets thrown around a lot in our arena, and I feel like it's been the same way like awesome has been abused by me and others. I feel like it's hard to tell. I know what a story is, but I feel like people have a very hard time figuring out what the story is, because the meaning isn't clear, right? So how do people figure out what it is? Like, how can they hone in on that and do a better job of it?
How can people hone in on the story? I think that comes to, if you're good at PR and you're good at titles, that's where you're going to excel. I think the seed of the idea is nailing that title. So imagine that the whole infographic was blown off the face of the earth, right? And the only thing that you have left is literally just one line of text. How can you make that so interesting that you could put it in a subject line and I email it to Kate and Kate opens it and then wants to hear more and replies to me? That's really the magic of that part.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like, while that seems obvious to you and I, it's really the challenge for people. They don't know what the title is going to be. What's the compelling component? What's the thing that's going to make people go, right? And just figuring it out.
So a lot of people just think that just because something is simple, it's easy, but simple is the opposite of easy. Simple is incredibly hard to do, right? Simplicity is the currency that travels the web that influences human behavior. And it starts with that title. It starts with that seed of the idea to get your buy-in. How do I go past your rational brain and appeal to your emotion to make you want to read on? And if you don't nail that on the first try, that's fine. I've seen websites that test against like 40 different titles. Why people think that they're just a genius because they just riff off something immediately. It just doesn't always work like that. You might have a flash of brilliance, but usually you have to nuance it a lot. And you may want to try it against different audiences too. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw somebody who I respect on Twitter who was touting Apple as like the king of all, basically one-liners. And I didn't know, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit because I don't think that of Apple. But I also know that they've got a huge, massive team and tons of testing that goes in there. And
totally.
And like, so I don't think it's useful particularly to pound out how some behemoth company does it for the rest of us, right? Because we have to start from a different angle.
Well, it's not relatable because if you had hundreds of billions of dollars in free cash flow, like what is it that you can't do or buy or whatever, right? So I agree with you. It's not relatable. But if you say, hey, I'm just a small business here, I can come up with these ideas. It's not just for the largest companies of the world. I mean, we're hired by large companies of the world to help them with a lot of messaging.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, speaking of, we wanted to talk about fame. So let's talk about, what did you want to talk about around fame?
So I don't like the word fame. No offense to your sign.
That's all right.
So let me say it like this.
The idea of fame or just the word itself?
It's a good question. I think, how about this? People take fame the wrong way because fame and greed and ego are just this really horrible black hole that's circling the drain of humanity, right? I think that if you're trying to use your fame, there's an interesting guy by the name of Dr. Rick Rigsby. He had this fabulous commencement speech, and he says to use your influence to impact others. So I think that you could also cringe at the word, feel free to fight back at me here and be like, well, the word influence sucks. Yeah, it sort of does. But I think that the word influencer sucks. So an influencer could be self-centered and want to seek fame only for themselves, even to the detriment of others. A person of true influence wants to help other people attain things that are great. So back when we turned 14 as an organization, back in August, I kind of came up with the way of thinking about it because I was tired of just saying we make infographics and people are like, yeah, who cares? Like, what is that? Are you just like some software platform or you just download templates off the internet? It's like, no. All right, well, what do you do then? So I told people that we help make the world's ideas simple, visual, and influential. So I think that there's a better side of fame that invites other people along for the ride, that it isn't just about you. So that's kind of my problem with fame. And again, that could just be the way that modern society reads into that word. I don't think that you mean anything bad with it.
Yeah. So, and this is important because we're talking about story, right? And so like the reason I like the word fame is because there's a little, it's naughty a little bit, right? And so that's my way of making noise is I like to be slightly insouciant and slightly lawless, right? I love, so I associate fame with Machiavelli a little bit, right? Now, as these guys all know, I used to broadcast to 20 million listeners a day at XM. I've had fame of sorts, right? And you're absolutely right. Like there's a duty to lift others up when you're on top, of course, but this is about like, we're talking about standing out visually or in text. Oh, good point, JS. That's awesome.
Okay.
Yes. That's a great one. So and JS is talking about influence, and he also pointed out another point here, just create, test, and tweak, and rinse and repeat. And I wanted to quickly say how that never wears out, right? You always have to do that, although it's harder. It sounds easier than it is to apply, as well. But the good thing about when you are testing, Brian, and I'm sure you know this, is you don't have to do it very long. Like for us, we found if we hear something 2 or 3 times, we got to change it, just from our customers, we know pretty quickly. But anyway, so we're talking about communicating and standing out and making noise. And I'm interested in getting people to do that feeling, right? And to also make them go, huh, a little bit, right? That's because that works for us. Like a little bit, like, what does she mean?
You have to knock people off their access a little bit.
That's it.
So I'll tell you, like we were talking about meetings and how long and short meetings are. Usually I will say something just absolutely absurd in a meeting. And it's almost like a heartbeat where I'm just checking a pulse to make sure that they're still listening, as opposed to just totally like Zoom fatigue. I'm so sick of meetings. How many more meetings do I have to have in a day? So I will usually say that, I just look like some just regular dude in a suit, but I will say stuff like, people are like, what? What are you talking about? It's crazy.
Knock them off their access. I love that. And I think that's a good way to, communicate your message, whatever message it is, and to do it in a way that does cut through that noise, right? And to think about what that means, because people are inspired by people who are knocking people off their accesses, right?
Oh yeah. Not to be purposefully contrarian, but like if you're just going to be like some crappy copy of Gary Vee that doesn't curse or whatever, I don't know. Like it's so lame that people have these avatars and they think that they have to model themselves after X, and it's not a good look, right?
Yeah, and Gary is our friend, by the way. And it's interesting because that is someone who people like want to be and are trying to mimic that, and you can see them not doing it very well because it's not their genuine, it's not their genuine place. It's not their center, right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, and that's the key thing is, like I always say with your copy, when you read it out loud, if it feels awkward, it is awkward. It's not, right? All right.
It's okay to get uncomfortable, but uncomfortable and awkward are not the same thing.
Yeah. Right. Because uncomfortable can be beautiful. Is that what you mean?
Uncomfortable is a proper process of refinement to help you get to the next level. Awkward is something that's totally not you and you're wearing the wrong suit.
That's true.
I didn't read that from somewhere. That's just me saying weird stuff. Yeah.
So can I ask you about the tree actually? Does the tree have meaning?
It's a tree of life, and I'm really tired of people in their Zoom backgrounds. So here's the test, right? So I'm not just like being rude and drinking.
Yeah, here.
But it still is late in the day, and this is coffee. I don't need other drugs or anything. Just coffee, fine. So you ever see where like somebody has like this beautiful array of whatever in the background, and then they have a sip of coffee, and you just see their horrible, messy bed, and it's like, really, come on. How is nobody like this is the cutting edge, bleeding edge technology of our lives? I just don't understand those things.
The irony is human, it's so funny. We were all actually today on a team meeting, and Chris Bro, you don't know this, but when you were gone to help Kate, his wife is Kate Snow from NBC. And so he has to sometimes push the on button of recording of the camera while he's in a lately meeting. And while he was gone, there was a figurine on the windowsill behind him. And I was like, what is that? And all 10 of us were zooming in, trying to figure out what it was. And
everybody's obsessed with the background.
It is.
That over there, that's a nest, right?
Right.
So sometimes if I really want to mess with the audience, like I'll just log on and like, change the heating and cooling, and it'll start glowing, and people are like, what is going on here? But yeah, I love props and stuff like that. I think that they're really important. If you ever want to really freak somebody out, what you do is, so this is your setup, right, Kate? And this is mine. It's usually pretty consistent. This is like my totem instead of just the random background. But what if you just took a custom background where you took yourself in a shot, and then like you totally like got up and walked away, but you're still sitting there? Like you could freak people out.
My CTO did that. Literally.
What's that?
My CTO did that at a meeting. Right. And I'm the only one who caught him. And I was sitting there just peeing my pants because it was just him sitting there like this.
Right. And it's like, you did not know. Is this like how inattentive you are to reading?
It's so hilarious. And the reason I knew it was because his cat was sitting behind him and the tail stopped wagging, you know?
That's so crazy.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
I think that, like, that line basically summarizes education during the pandemic, is kids figuring out how to out-Zoom their teachers.
Yeah, right. Well, on that note, we have to go, but on one last thing, I just want to hone in on this. Like, so infographics versus text only. Is there some quick ROI you can tell us? Like, when you use an infographic, you see like 80,000% more engagement, or like, what's the?
So I like citing a very specific famous case that we did. Once upon a time, a basketball player's agent basically came to us and said, hey, this guy's got potential. He's totally going to be an all-star. Go get him a huge contract. And we're like, all right, that's kind of a big ask, but yeah, sure, let's give it a roll. So if you've ever seen the movie or read the book Moneyball, and you know about data analytics and sabermetrics, that whole thing, to ruin the movie for all of you, basically, baseball used to be medieval. Then they put stats to it, and they figured out how to aggregate players based on stats and numbers. And then slowly it trickled down into all the other sports. The slowest one basically was basketball, because basketball is all bravado and one-on-ones and personality and Michael Jordan sticking his tongue out and all that stuff. Okay, so we took those concepts and did some data analysis on this particular player, and we said, hey, dollar for dollar, pound for pound, he should be like in the top of the league. And he's like 22 years old and he's just getting started. So we started putting this out there all over the media, not press releases, not ads and garbage, but like straight up media. And then other places started picking it up. And then before the trade deadline that year, everybody was talking about it. And he went from getting like almost not a contract to a $64 million deal, which he then parlayed to $180 million follow-up. And now he's like the 6th highest paid player ever. So I don't know, like, I think that the word influence or fame, whatever, you know, we can argue about that for years, probably. I think that people have the wrong idea when they only look at the surface level. Like, everybody's seen that picture of the glacier, right? Where it's like, you see this little bit, but really all the hard work is underneath.
Yeah.
What you're looking at is the page views and the likes and some basic surface level stuff. You're missing that there is a much, much higher level of influence that people can play. So we've seen people get like funded and acquired and shown in front of VCs and governments. And again, it just kind of depends on where you fall on the Trivial Pursuit wheel. But I think that it can really go a much longer and deeper way. And then I've also seen, to just kind of quote like weird different stats, because I don't like saying like, oh, it's 200% better, whatever, like who cares? I've seen people like a decade later still cite stuff, still reach out to it, right? And still want that for different things and translate it and get permission to use it in books and have like government agencies use it and all sorts of crazy stuff.
That's huge. The legacy. It's built-in legacy content is what it is.
Yeah, so like everybody preaches like, oh, make one content thing and then chop it up 30 different ways and just have like 30 crappy pieces of the same thing. Okay, fine. But like the second that stops and you stop pushing it and you stop putting ads against it, how long is that content able to stand on its own? And when you really do it well enough like this, it can last for years. And I've seen over a decade.
Well, so what's really validating, we're gonna wrap up now, is that a lot of the stuff that we've been preaching around copywriting is exactly what Brian has been reinforcing today around infographics. So that's great, and it's hopefully helpful to all of you as well. I think that we can talk about the next masterclass. I'll talk more about visuals and sort of tie in some of the stuff we talked about here with Brian again, so that we can all do a better job of like just, you know, being delicious on the plate, like looking delicious on the plate, right? So round of applause for Brian Wallace, everybody. Next week on Lately Office Hours, what is happening? Oh, Alex, our special guest, Alex Lowe, our new team member. He used to be a customer of ours, Brian, and he freaked out and was amazing and sharing us all over the place. And so I hired him to work for us, which is amazing. And so he's going to be doing LinkedIn best practices for all of you guys, because our customers keep asking all these nuanced questions about, you know, when to publish and yada, yada, and all the good stuff. So that's next week and it's open to the public. Thank you, Brian. Love you. And all the best to you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Been a pleasure.